I was lucky enough to grow up in a rural Georgia community with creeks and woods and places to play outside. And my best friend and I would play from dawn to dusk as often as we could. We loved it. Studying aquatic life, wildlife, plants, you name it. And it was at that point in my life I developed a lifelong bond with nature. But one thing that we always saw, no matter how far we went, was litter. Whether it were cigarette butts, beer cans, appliances, car parts, no matter how far off the trail we went, it was always around. And we were taught better than that. Our parents taught us not to litter, and they also supported us in our movement to clean it up. So my best friend and I got out there with trash bags, picking up trash every week, and we felt so empowered by it. We felt like we were making a real difference in our own backyard. By age 10, I was sending out mailers to the neighborhood about local environmental problems, and it was at that point where I became a young environmental activist. But 4 years later, age 14, I came out as gay, and that significantly changed the course of my life, changed the relationship that I have with my peers, family, except for my mom, because she was unwavering. Thank you. But yeah, I started to become troubled, and I was lucky to have a queer support group in my school back in 2006. And unfortunately, a lot of us were also hurting. Using substances became part of that. So by age 14, cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, you name it, we were all doing it. We were just trying to numb that pain. And the part that I feel the most shame about looking back is those cigarette butts were going out the window. Even though I knew it was wrong, I was still doing it. When we finished drinking an alcoholic beverage, driving down the road, that went out the window too. Dispose of the evidence, right? And again, I knew it was wrong, but I just continued on in that way. But it caught up to me. At age 16, I was arrested at school. I was expelled, and that really shook my whole world up. Had to do probation, lost the ability to get my driver's license for some time, and I had to do 40 hours of community service. Can anyone guess what I had to do? I had to pick up litter. And it was like I picked right back up where I left off. I was picking up trash vigorously, like clearly more engaged than anybody else there. And one of the police officers really took note of it and said in front of everybody, and this kid, he is the most hardworking delinquent I've ever seen. So yeah, that little environmental activist got reborn, and I wish I could just tell you it was all uphill from there, but it wasn't. I just kept doing the same stuff. Kept smoking, kept drinking, drugs, stuff still going out the window. Fast forward, age 19, I get arrested again. And this time I'm an adult, and it's expensive. Thousands of dollars worth of lawyer costs and court fees and probation. I lost my license, 100 hours community service, 5 nights in jail. Can you guess what I did for community service? There's a theme here, right? Picking up litter. And this time I got it together. This time I was like, okay, I've got to make some serious changes for my own health and reconnect with that environmental activist in me. So I started spending more time outside, working on fitness and just spiritual well-being in general. And with that, I reconnected with the environmental activism piece. I decided to go vegan and just various lifestyle changes to reducing waste. Got back involved with picking up litter, and that is really where my heart resided. And I'm so excited to tell you that it really has come full circle for me, as I am now the director of a litter organization called Green Steps. We remove litter all across the Southeast Tennessee region, and we also do education about waste, litter, and all that stuff. To date, we have removed 1.6 million pounds of litter from the Chattanooga region. That is something I'm so proud of. Thank you. And let me tell you, you can find litter just about anywhere in this town. On the way here from my car, I literally found myself kicking a can. I mean, it's just ubiquitous. And we prioritize all areas, whether it's in the city, the suburbs, the natural areas, you name it, we pick up litter there. But one place in particular that I really like to emphasize removing litter is from our waterfronts and waterways. We've got trash here right along the Tennessee River. That piece of trash could theoretically end up in the river and float all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And then from there, it's just one big ocean. And aquatic trash is a lot more difficult to recover than when it's on land. It can sink and it can form these massive garbage patches that you may have seen at some point. This is a threat for wildlife. It's a threat for aquatic life. And humans aren't exempt for the threats that it presents either. For instance, plastics. When they slowly start to break down, that can take hundreds of thousands of years, they get into tiny, tiny little pieces called microplastics. Contaminants are released in that process, and then that gets into our food supply, it gets into our drinking water, and causes a real threat for human health and wildlife. But thinking about trash in the ocean, do you think that all that trash is just coming from litter? It's not. Every day all across the world, there are items being illegally dumped into the ocean. It happens every day. Textile waste, plastic waste, you name it, it's going there. So while picking up litter is great, we can do our little part here with that. There's a bigger problem. I started to connect the dots more that really we have a problem with waste in general. So let's take a look at the way that we manage waste in the United States. MSW is municipal solid waste. About 50% of all of our MSW goes to the landfill. Now, this is a really well-designed pit in the ground where trash gets buried eventually. And it's good because it's not just out in the environment, we're not just burning it in open barrels, but still, these items can never be recovered again, and you can't develop on a landfill site again. You could maybe put a patch of grass at best and have a little park, but trees can't be planted there because the roots will permeate the layer. It's just all around not a good thing. 24% going to recycling and 8% going to composting. So the thing that's really scary about this is that 95.7% of all of this waste could have been either composted or recycled by some means. So really that 4.7%, this is what's going to the landfill. 4.3%, that's all that we should be putting in the landfill. Now you might say to yourself, well, I recycle. Isn't that a good example of environmental stewardship? Well, yes and no. A lot of us put an item in the bin and kind of hope that it ends up somewhere where it's getting recycled, and we don't think about it any further than that. But it's a more complex process than that. So you start with your hopefully recyclable item. You put that in either a drop-off center or your curbside bin, and then it goes to what's called a material recovery facility, otherwise known as a MRF. The MRF is a complex process of machines that are sorting these items by type, but also humans. So after some of these items have gone through machines for sortings, humans are then on the front line hand-picking these items. Imagine a conveyor belt coming down fast, and you have to hand-pick out plastic types to go in their respective bins. And I'm talking they are moving at lightning speed. Think about what's in these facilities. A lot of our recycling contained food at one point. And if you didn't do a good job of rinsing it out, there's going to be food on these lines. Food attracts bugs. It attracts vermin. I had a friend working one of these lines who was an inmate, and she cited rats coming down the line and jumping onto the workers. She also cited those big Cheeto Puff jars, one of those filled with used syringes, a loaded gun. This is the kind of stuff that's ending up in these material recovery facilities. And notice I said inmate. She was an inmate. They weren't getting paid to do this work. And that's not across the board for every MRF, but they're not getting paid a lot. It's physically strenuous. They're exposed to health hazards. It's just really not a great place to be. That said, it goes through that process and then gets baled up and sold on the market. Now, while your metal materials like aluminum cans and steel cans, as well as paper products and glass, have a pretty good chance of being recycled, plastics pose a little bit of a different situation. So, when you look at this, don't be shy. Raise your hand if you've seen this on a plastic container. Raise your hand if you thought that that meant it was recyclable. Right? Me 6 months ago, same. But what I have learned that this is not true. These are what are called resin identification codes. This was developed by the plastic industry to mark plastics by type. So this is just simply the type of plastic was made. And see those little chasing arrows that makes it look like it's recyclable? Nope. That was just co-opted into it to make plastics look more environmentally friendly. The reality of this is that plastics 1 and 2 are the only ones that are generally recycled in the United States. And to take that a step further, most facilities require that it be in a bottle or a jug form. So all those other plastics, if you're putting those in your recycling bin, they're just taking a long and complicated and expensive route to the landfill, right? Now that's not to say that these plastics couldn't be recycled by some means, but the reality is it's not happening in mass here in the United States. After China stopped taking our plastics in 2018, there was no market for these cheap, low-end 3 through 7 plastics. All that to say, recycling is not the most straightforward or transparent process. It's a part of the solution for managing waste, but it's not the end-all, be-all. Now here's a practice that is absolutely more transparent and something that we can all do, and it's composting. So just to put it really simply, composting is taking some sort of organic material, putting it either into a backyard compost bin or sending that to an industrial composter, and then that becomes humus, which is a type of soil that is used for fertilizing and conditioning land. So if you have your own backyard compost bin, you could put plant material in there like your yard trimmings, as well as your food scraps and eggshells, and then that will slowly turn to dirt. And if you're sending it to an industrial composter, they can take things like meat and bones and dairy products, as well as your certified compostable ware, such as bags, cups, cutlery, things like that. You shouldn't put those in your backyard compost bin. So that said, usually these industrial facilities will provide you with a final product of soil that you can use. Now, that said, a lot of time, energy, and human resources go into growing our food and getting it to our grocery stores. So really, ideally, you would just be throwing the scraps away that you absolutely cannot eat and doing your best to eat everything that you buy. So now we know a little bit about composting and recycling and how these are good ways to mitigate our waste. But what is the real call to action here? It is to reduce the amount of waste that we produce. Maybe some of you today learned that so many of our plastics are really just ending up in the trash. So call to action, reduce your plastic waste. It is so important. It stays in the environment, again, for hundreds to thousands of years. And even if you recycle these plastics, we talked about the MRF, it's low-wage jobs. How do you think these recycling plants are running? Also low-wage jobs. Plastic recycling is also a polluter in itself. So reducing our waste, and there's all kinds of things you can do. Maybe when you go to a restaurant, you bring your own to-go container, carrying a reusable water bottle. The list goes on and on and on of things that we can do. But remember my journey? Has it been linear or perfect? Definitely not. It's been anything but linear or perfect. And guess what? Today, I'm still not completely zero waste, but that doesn't stop me from getting up here in front of all of you to try to provide some guidance with what I do know. And it also doesn't stop me from making slow and continuous, concerted effort to do my part. So have grace with yourself. Imperfect effort is worthwhile. So if you want to learn more and keep this conversation going, I invite you to connect with me. You can find me greenstepschat.com. You can follow us on all the social media at greenstepschat. If you live in the Chattanooga area, please come get your hands dirty with us, pick up some trash, come join a workshop, learn more about recycling, learn more about composting, and all these really complex systems. I look forward to continuing the dialogue with all of you. Let's talk some trash. Thanks.